Now that we have some walls and we know how to view them from different vantage points, it is time to put in some windows and doors. ArchiCAD makes this easy. We have a door tool and a window tool. Let's go ahead and get started with the window tool. And if we look at our choices, we have many objects to choose from. In the object library, we have a folder called Windows. We have metal windows, wooden windows, we have general openings, and we have louvers and vents. So all of these are in the Windows folder. And the only trick with Windows in ArchiCAD is that there are a lot of parameters, and this can be a little overwhelming. So we strongly encourage you to set up some favorites. I'll introduce the idea of a favorite here in a minute. And if you set these up once and get everything kind of the way you want, then it's not too hard to get around and plop in the doors and windows. Once the settings are set up, it's easy to drop them in. It's easy to put them into the right place. It's easy. Everything is easy from that point, but there are a lot of parameters. Let's take a basic casement window. We'll start there and we'll step by step go through these parameters. I'm not going to be able to get through everyone in detail. Frankly, I forget how some of them work, so I have to play around with them when I'm doing this. First thing is the width of the window. That's easy. 2'6". The height of the window, 5 foot. We have the elevation of the window, and I have several choices here. You can see I can reference the header to the wall base, the wall top, to the story. It really depends how you're modeling your building. If all of your walls are on a single elevation, then it's really pretty easy. Typically I'm using header to wall base. That's the one that I can visually understand quickly. Reveal is relative to the wall face or the core. Usually I do the wall face. I have some insertion modes, and this is really just the initial insertion. Once the door or window is inserted, it really doesn't matter how these were set up. So center, left, or right, no big deal. Okay, so that's easy to understand. We have a couple choices down here, how the window sits in a canted wall. And now we get into it. So this looks, oh, there's not too many, but if you look, there's all of these screens, and you can either select them over here with the pull down, or you can go through each one individually and step by step. So here is a main tab, the window settings. Underneath we have frame and sash. There's a button here that goes up to the main parent, what they call the parent window. Basically it's just organizing this in a hierarchy, let's just kind of step through it and see what we can come through. So here's another place that you can take a look at your window size. If you want to display the unit size, which is typically what I do, then I select this option. If I want to see a rough opening, I'm going to select this option. And all of this is going to be different based on the type of window you use. If you're using a vinyl window versus a wood window versus an aluminum window, every one of them is going to be a little different. A wood window, typically the actual net frame is the nominal size, whereas a vinyl or fiberglass window is going to be undersized, and the nominal size will be the rough openings. So you're going to want to, depending on how careful you want to be, how much information you're conveying, you're going to want to set that up properly. Here is our offset to the jamb, the width. So it's a 1/4 inch gap. So it's a 1/2 inch over for our rough. And that's the similar for the head. Here we have a 1/4 inch above, and we're sitting flush to the sill. So that's the nominal size. The next one is how much the window is going to be open in 3D. If I go up here, I can see it in 3D, and if I want to put a value in here, I can actually open the window, and I can open it in 2D and I can open it in 3D. And this is sometimes nice to help convey the operation a little bit better, especially in the 2D if you open the window a little bit, but sometimes it can get in the way. So, user choice. Oops. Let's get back into there. And detail. So you have some levels of detail that you want to show. I generally just do full detail. You can set them by the model view options, which is the MVO, and go just set it at detailed and full will give you the most detailed representation in 2D and 3D respectively. And you can play with that, and unless you're doing a huge project where the windows are just teeny tiny, I generally just keep the full detail exposed in the drawing and in the model. Here I'm going to give some dimensions for the sash. Here the sash and the frame. And you just have to kind of go through, if you're going to take the time and set up a standard to represent a particular type of window, just represent it the best you can by putting in these parameters. Now here's where you're going to get into your grid styles. So here's a diamond grid, a prairie style grid, lots of different choices. I can change the number of panels in each direction. So it's one column vertically, and it's one column and 3 rows. So horizontal could be considered rows, vertical is your column. And some of these, and all these little options. Does the grid, is it inside and outside? Is it offset from the window? How thick is it? What's the width? You have an option for each of these. I'll go ahead and go back to this option here. Opening lines. Do I want to show these opening lines in 2D? Do I want to show them the operation line in 3D? And here's a fun one. So here's where we're going to do our model attributes, they're calling it. And this is where I'm going to set all of my surfaces for the window. And so I have the outside surfaces. I have it set up to what I call MW Masterworks window exterior 1, window interior 1, window exterior 1, window interior 1. And this in the grid is white, but it probably wants to be window exterior 1, window interior 1. And this allows me to override the entire project. So the way I do my surfaces, I have the surfaces that are used in every project, walls, windows, doors. And instead of going through and changing each window to a different surface, I just set them all to the same surface, and I just adjust the surface. Then I can globally change all of my windows, which is generally how you want to actually go about doing it. I have my clear glass. You have an option to just choose this, and it's going to set every material except the glass to be the same. Sometimes that's very convenient. I can have butt joints, I can have miter joints, and some of these you're just gonna have to play with and try to understand it. What the pens are going to be used to draw the frame, the sash, and the glass. The wall opening, I have different choices so I have a solid wall, a stud wall, a brick wall, and these are complicated. I'll be honest. I'll go up to the parent page, and you're gonna have to just play with these and you're gonna have to look at the plan and just keep working it until you finally have it represented as well as you possibly can. You can pull the wall side in if you have the material, often the stucco wrapping into the window? Do you want the side of the window or the edge of the window to be the color that's reflected there? I could, I can't really emphasize any more than you just have to do it, play with it, and finally get the best representation and then store it as a favorite. Okay. So I can set the window, the depth of the window, forward and back here. Here's some more reveal. Here I can explicitly include the dimensions. If I go back to the reveal. So yeah, the stud wall is pretty limited. The solid wall gives us quite a few options, and the custom closure, this allows you to take your different layers of your composite and decide how many of them actually turn into the window. And see how this, like this layer number 1, if this were stucco or drywall, depending on if it's the inside or the outside, rolls into the window and captures the inner core of the window. So this can be, a nice option to use, and this is probably worthy of a secondary video because it's just so involved. All right, so you can do masonry arches. I can do a straight arch, jack arch. Again, there's just work through it until you find what you want. Then I can, if I want to gang the windows by putting multiples next to each other, then I would adjust the frame dimension here and how these gang together. If I want casing inside or outside, I can have a sill, I can have a stool, I can have different types of shades. On and on and on. Corner, so this sets it up so that I can have the windows come together nicely and create a corner that is of the same material. Here I'm going to set the dimensions of my apron and my stool. Casing dimensions. Now, one thing about the casing in ArchiCAD, it really only allows you to have rectangular casing. I choose to generally not include my casing with the actual door or window, but I create another object that I set on top of it. And in that object, it allows me to have all the contours of the casing that I want, a little more detail. So I often turn this off. Here's more information on the sunshade and the corners. Here's a section for this is the attributes for the fixtures and the fittings. So there's model attributes for the window itself, for the opening itself, and then for the additional elements that get attached to the window. And then finally, here's the way I'm going to control how the window's going to be, which pens and fills are going to be used for the plan view and for the elevations and sections. So like I said, a lot of parameters, a little bit overwhelming. Set it up once, take your time, and don't do it again. These are general settings that are where these are going to be used in general. Well, this is where you want to set up most of your pen settings here. And this is if you want to do some actual overrides. So I can override the line types, I can override the pen types. That way, if you want to create some uniformity without having to change all the parameters, you can just do it here. But really, it's better to do it in the actual window. And we have the markers. We usually use the standard marker that comes with ArchiCAD. There are many. available to you, and you just have to decide which one looks and feels most appropriate to you. Here's the information that goes in the marker. So it's the fonts and the line weights, or the font size, font style, pens. Here, I'm going to give it some more information. Here's the 2D representation of the marker. So I will admit that it's overwhelming. Go through it once, make sure you understand it, and don't do it again. Here are some different parameters I can store regarding the windows. So this video is intended just to give you a nice overview, and at some point I think I'll do a couple of more detailed ways of doing schedules and getting into some of these properties, and even creating your own properties so that you can populate your window schedules exactly the way you want. So you'll find that all of the settings are very similar. Here I have a single casement. Here I have a casement over an awning, and it's almost exactly the same. I have the ability to open up 2 different sashes because I have 2 different windows. So there's the awning, there's the casement, and I can control the frame size in between, and I can control how big the bottom window is. Make any sense? So, oops. So there it is with 3 feet. Let's go back into that window, and every one of these is very similar. So if I go into here, so one thing that is useful, let's talk about the the favorites. So the favorites, and I think I have some in this file. Let's see. So here are some favorites that we've set up, and what this is you take all of your settings, get it just the way you want, and then you create a favorite, and then it'll show up here, so that when I double click that, it assumes all of the settings from my favorite. You can see here I have the exterior material, the interior material. This is an awning window, 2x5. Here's my node. Now, if I want to take these properties, so this is an important strategy here. So I use Alt, I pick up those properties. That goes into my awning. I can copy the properties from one window type to another type, and that can become very useful. The trick is, don't click on any of these until you transfer them, because as soon as you click on one, it'll pull in the properties from the default. But I want to actually paste the properties. So let's say the window I was just using had the settings that I want, and I want to transfer those to this casement window. Then I hit Control and Alt, and I inject those properties in here. All the properties that can be transferred between the window types will be transferred between the window types. So if I set up one window just the way I want, I can transfer most of those properties into another window. So the colors and the sizes and the where the window sits in the wall and all those things will transfer over. And so now I have basically the same window, but now this is in the form of a casement. So I can open this 25 degrees where similar window, but this is an awning. All of the properties are basically the same. So keep that in mind. You can copy and paste. So whatever you bring in as your default, you can paste in. And again, the trick is, if you're going to pull these in, don't click on anything because it'll revert to the default. You have to hit Control and paste it in first. Notice that it changed the size, it changed the header, it changed the materials. Everything became the same. is from the last window that I had the property. So that's a really useful strategy to use. Now let's talk about inserting some windows. I have inadvertently inserted windows, and obviously it's pretty easy. I just touch the window, click, and now I'm going to decide which is in and which is out. So the sun is telling me that that's what I'm going to click on the outside. So whichever side is going to be my outside of the window. And then in this case, left and right doesn't really matter, but if it were a casement, it certainly would. So I've told this is outside, and that's my swing. If I convert this to a casement, I'm going to pull these properties in. I'm going to paste them into, or inject them into a casement window. Go here, and now my swing really matters. And I tell it which side's in and which side's out. There we go. Now it's a little tricky to place the window accurately horizontally in 3D. So sometimes you just might pop it in there, then go into 2D and locate it. The vertical position's easy because that's an explicit value right here. So if I go to 2D with F2, now I have a funny window option here. So I'm going to go to first floor proposed, and that brought in my settings to display the window. For some reason it wasn't showing. This is a topic for another video, but these are all the settings for the current view. And if I want to move this door, or in this case window, it's pretty easy. I just pick it up, I move my cursor temporarily with the Shift Alt, and then I can just put an explicit value. And now if I measure that, I can see that I'm exactly 2 feet from the outside corner of the framing. If I want this window, I'm going to here, click there, and I'm going to go 2 feet. Now the spacing between the frames is exactly 2 feet. If I wanted the spacing of the rough openings to be 2 feet, I'd move my cursor there, and then I'd offset 2 feet. And if I measure, now my roughs are exactly 2 feet. So it's pretty easy. Again, I'm using all the same tools. If I want to copy, I can use this as my spacing. So I get the same spacing. Let's see, F9, move that from there to there. If I want to, oh, I'm not doing that. If I go from here, from rough to rough, there we go. Now my spacing's the same. So F5 will move, F9 will copy. If I want to mirror it and just flip it, so in this case I have a casement, so sometimes I might want to mirror it. Hit F7, click, and I'm centering it, rotating it about the center. I can also flip it inside and out. I want to mirror a copy from one side to the other. So all the same tools, nothing terribly surprising there. That's one of the great things about ArchiCAD. If I want to take these properties and inject them in here, notice now the window's shut. I can inject in 2D. I can locate them in 2D. So 2D is a really important aspect of manipulating my doors and windows. It takes a lot of practice. It takes some time to set it up the way you want. And once you do, you'll find that, moving these, inserting these, and basically just getting them to do everything you want, it's going to be easy. You may want to do one setup for a house with siding. You're going to maybe need to do another setup with stucco returns, drywall returns versus casing. And if you set up your standards and you just populate them all the way through, you're going to find that it's actually pretty easy. The doors are identical in concept. You have a bunch of doors to choose from, sliding doors, swinging doors. So we have metal doors, we have wood doors, internal doors, which you end up often using for outside. So don't feel weird about that. I wish they didn't call them internal and exterior or entrance. We also have openings. So these are just going to be perforations in the walls, but with a particular shape. You'll have parameters that are associated with it. You'll have some specialty doors, archtop doors, bifold doors, empty doors, garage doors, gates, sliding doors. You know, you're going to use all of these at one point or another, one time or another. And the basic utility of it is set up the same way. Now I have, you know, a few more options because now I have glass with, or I can have paneled door. Work through it, find what works for you, make it a favorite. So if I want to make this a favorite, here's my favorites. If I right mouse, let's see, I don't need to right mouse. So this is a new favorite. I can make a folder to organize them. So if I wanted this to be a new favorite, I could just click, I could type, I'll just put temp, hit OK, and there's a new favorite. So that's easy to pull up and find again. If I want to delete that favorite, I can do that. And this favorite concept of favorites works across all the different elements in ArchiCAD, including two-dimensional elements, and you can set them up and use them. And it just basically acts as a series of defaults that you can quickly modify things and not have to continue to go back and change all of your settings. Something, especially with doors and windows, because there are so many parameters, it's a good place to spend some time to make it easier in the long run. So I think that will give you a good place to start. Windows are also openings. Here, these are openings. There's also, I don't know where they are, I'd have to find it. There's some niches. And a niche is like an opening, but it actually maintains the back. There's a round back, a square back. So those can be useful. And another thing you'll find is if you just go use empty opening, that's just going to make a rectangular perforation in the wall. So that is always available to you as well. Have fun with the doors and windows. It's going to take some time. Put in the energy, set it up, and don't fight with it. Have fun.